In the town of Barle-Nassau there is a line on the floor. If you're on one side of this line, you're in the Netherlands with its fancy windmills. If you're on the other, you're in Belgium with its convenient access for German armoured divisions. Nowadays, many a nation is easily recognisable by its silhouette, and within the borders of a nation we can easily determine who its people are and all that good stuff. The obvious question is, was it so clear in the ancient or medieval world? Let's say you're a Roman peasant, congratulations, during the reign of Emperor Hadrian, who ruled Rome at its greatest territorial extent. If you simply walked north from Rome, when, if ever, would you know that you'd left the Roman Empire? See, Rome is a good example when discussing borders, because it had a centralised government, a professional army whose job it was to protect the empire, and also the Romans had a good sense of borders, which they called limes. Unsurprisingly, much of Rome's limes stopped at natural barriers, like mountain ranges or perhaps most notably the Rhine or Danubian rivers. The border was sporadically lined with watchtowers and wooden fortifications where possible, but this was a long border and so naturally much of it was unmarked. The biggest exception to this was of course Hadrian's Wall. Maps like this make it look like these areas were firmly in Rome's control and that those outside were entirely foreign. To put it bluntly, this simply wasn't the case. There were settlements close to the empire's borders who made quite a living trading with Rome, and many of those within the Roman Empire didn't really see themselves as being Roman. Looking at you, Britannia. So travelling in and out of the empire wasn't too difficult, and many traders did so regularly, even via hard borders like Hadrian's Wall. This ease of travel is why there's so many Roman items and coins found throughout Central, Eastern and Northern Europe. Of course, in the south of the empire, basically the North African coast and Egypt, the southern borders were much harder to patrol. Egypt's southern frontier was one such difficult border, but it did bring great profits. Here, the Romans had to deal with tribes like the Blemmyes. You may have heard of them before because the Romans believed that these were a people who didn't have heads. The Romans had a good trading relationship with the Blemmyes, who acted as intermediaries between Rome and the south of Africa, but the Blemmyes would occasionally raid too. Perhaps Rome's most important border was that with the Parthian, later Sasanian Persian Empire. Here, the border was a series of fortifications with many legions waiting for any Persian invasion, but again people could and did travel between them. None of what I've told you was stagnant though. Rome's borders and the look of them fluctuated massively over the centuries until it all came crashing down. So moving forward over 1,000 years from Hadrian, we reach the medieval period, and here we'll focus on the Anglo-Scottish border formalised in the 1237 Treaty of York. Just to let you know, the Anglo-Scottish border is not marked by Hadrian's Wall, the entirety of which lies in England. This may come as a shock to you, but throughout history, England and Scotland have not been the best of friends. The Borderlands, known as the Marches, played host to many a raid or military campaign over the centuries, as both sides sought to bring the other into a permanent state of non-existence. During times of peace, the two lands had to coexist, and local lords came to agreements, such as allowing livestock from either kingdom to graze on each other's lands. That's not to say things were peaceful. Bandits, or reeves as they were known, would raid across the border often. In fact, the practice of Scottish raiders extorting money from Englishmen gave birth to the word blackmail, roughly translated as meaning illicit rent. Policing these raids was basically impossible since there was no government capable enough to oversee the roughly 100-mile border. The law of the land on both sides was essentially try not to die, and neither the Scottish nor the English crowns were able to do much about it. Needless to say, the border between the two kingdoms in 1237 wasn't simply this line, it was blurred and much of it wasn't defined by natural barriers. To conclude, borders in the modern sense didn't exist either in theory or in practice in the ancient or medieval world. What we think of today as borders, those things which can block individuals from moving into a political entity, simply weren't feasible 1,000 years ago. Instead of strict borders, there were frontiers which marked a gradual shift from one polity to the next. The frontiers were primarily used by empires or kingdoms to keep out mass movements, i.e. armies instead of individuals, and in that sense they worked quite well. I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching, and a special thanks to all of these patrons you see on screen for their generosity in supporting the show, and a particularly special thanks to James Bisonet, Party Boyko, Michael Reynolds, Gustav Swan, Winston Kaywood, Sky Chappelle, Adam Harvey, Gabe Ellery and Azaka Flash.